My son said it was just a family dinner with my daughter-in-law's relatives. Simple, he said. Just a chance for everyone to get to know each other better. What he didn't mention was that 13 people would be ordering like they'd never seen food before at the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta. What he didn't mention was that the bill would come to nearly $9,000. What he didn't mention was that his wife had orchestrated the entire evening as a trap to humiliate me and drain my bank account. When the check arrived and my daughter-in-law leaned over with her practiced smile and asked, "Honey, cash or card?" She expected me to panic. She expected me to fumble. She expected me to meekly hand over my credit card like the foolish old woman she thought I was. Instead, I smiled, opened my bag slowly, and what I pulled out made everyone at that table go completely silent. That night, I taught them all a lesson they would never forget. Never underestimate a black woman who built her empire one meal at a time. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now let me tell you my story. My name is Beatrice Annette Johnson, and I am 69 years old. I was born in a shotgun house in rural Georgia, the fifth of 8 children. My mama worked as a domestic for white families, coming home with aching feet and stories of the fancy dinners she'd cooked but never tasted. My daddy worked the fields until his back gave out, then he worked them some more. We didn't have much, but we had love, we had faith, and we had food. Mama taught me to cook before I could read properly. Food is love made visible, she'd say, showing me how to season greens just right, how to make cornbread that melted on the tongue, how to stretch a chicken into 3 meals. Those lessons, taught in our cramped kitchen with the wood-burning stove, would become the foundation of my fortune. I left Georgia at 19, following a man to Atlanta. That man was Marcus Johnson, and he would become the love of my life for 47 years. Marcus was a dreamer with practical skills. He could fix anything with his hands and see opportunity where others saw obstacles. We married in 1975, in a tiny ceremony at the courthouse, with $200 between us and a whole lot of hope. We started small. Marcus drove a delivery truck during the day. I worked as a cook at a soul food restaurant downtown. At night we'd plan, we'd dream, we'd save every penny we could scrape together. Marcus would say, "You cook better than anyone I've ever known. Why should the restaurant owner get rich off your talent?" "We need capital," I'd reply practically. "We need equipment, a space, licenses. We'll get there, $1 at a time." And we did. In 1982, after 7 years of saving, sacrifice, and eating rice and beans more nights than I care to remember, we opened Johnson's Catering. It was just me in a rented commercial kitchen, Marcus doing deliveries in our beat-up van, and a prayer that someone would hire us. Our first client was a church. Mount Zion Baptist needed catering for their pastor's anniversary dinner. I cooked for 200 people, and when I saw those plates come back empty, when I heard the compliments flowing, when I saw people going back for seconds and thirds, I knew we had something special. Word spread. Churches led to family reunions led to weddings led to corporate events. By 1990, Johnson's Catering had 5 employees. By 2000, we had 15. By 2010, we had 50 employees, 3 commercial kitchens, and contracts with some of the biggest companies in Atlanta. Marcus and I worked side by side for all of it. He handled the business end, contracts, finances, logistics. I handled the food menus, quality control, client relationships. We were a perfect team, complementing each other's strengths, supporting each other's weaknesses. We had 1 child together, David. He came late in our lives. I was 27 when he was born, which wasn't late by normal standards, but we'd been so focused on building the business that a child felt like a luxury we could finally afford. David was our pride, our joy, our everything. We gave him opportunities we never had. Private schools, summer camps, college without debt. Maybe we gave him too much. Maybe we shielded him too well from the struggle that had built our success. Looking back, I wonder if we did him a disservice by not letting him feel the hunger that had driven us. 3 years ago, Marcus died. Pancreatic cancer. Quick and cruel. 1 month he was beside me planning our retirement, talking about finally taking that trip to Ghana we'd always dreamed about. The next month he was gone. The grief nearly destroyed me. Marcus wasn't just my husband, he was my business partner, my best friend, my confidant, my everything. For 47 years, we'd been 2 halves of a whole. Suddenly I was just half. After Marcus died, I couldn't face the business anymore. Every kitchen reminded me of him, every contract carried his handwriting, every success felt hollow without him there to celebrate, so I made the decision to sell. Johnson's Catering sold for $2.5 million. It was a fair price for a business that had served Atlanta for nearly 4 decades. But it felt like selling a piece of my soul. Still, Marcus would have wanted me to be practical, to be secure, to be taken care of. I invested the money wisely. Marcus had taught me well: low-risk bonds, index funds, a financial advisor who understood that I wanted security, not excitement. Between the sale, our savings, Marcus's life insurance, and our modest pension from years of contributions, I was set, more than set. I was wealthy. But you wouldn't know it to look at me. I still live in the same house Marcus and I bought in 1985. It's a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet Atlanta neighborhood. The house is paid off, well-maintained, comfortable. It holds our memories: Marcus's workshop in the garage, the kitchen we renovated together, the porch where we'd sit in the evenings planning our next move. I drive a 2010 Honda Accord. Marcus and I bought it new, and it runs perfectly fine. Every time I sit in that driver's seat, I remember him beside me, fiddling with the radio, singing off-key to old Motown songs. I dress simply, nice clothes, well-made, but not designer. I don't need a Louis Vuitton bag to know my worth. I don't need Louboutin heels to walk tall. My philosophy is simple: live below your means, invest wisely, give generously to causes that matter, and never let anyone know exactly how much you have. That last part is crucial. Money changes how people see you, how they treat you, what they want from you. Better to be underestimated than exploited. David knew I'd sold the business for a good amount, but he didn't know the specifics. He didn't know about the investments, the savings, the total picture. He saw my modest lifestyle and assumed I was comfortable but not wealthy. That suited me fine. But then David married Tiffany. Tiffany Marie Brooks came into my son's life 4 years ago. She was 32 to his 38, beautiful in that high-maintenance way, perfect nails, designer everything, hair always freshly done, makeup always flawless. She worked in marketing for a luxury car dealership, which basically meant she looked pretty and convinced wealthy men that they needed expensive cars. From the moment I met her, I felt uneasy. It wasn't anything specific I could point to. She was polite enough, smiled enough, said the right things, but there was something calculating behind her eyes. Something that was always assessing, always measuring. "Your mother is so sweet," she'd say to David, right in front of me as if I wasn't there. "So simple and down to earth." Simple. She used that word a lot. David was smitten. After years of casual dating and focusing on his career as a mid-level manager at a logistics company, he'd finally found the one. He was blind to what I could see clearly: that Tiffany's interest in him wasn't about love. It was about potential. See, David made a decent salary, around $85,000 a year. Respectable but not wealthy. However, he was the only child of business owners who'd sold their company. In Tiffany's mind, that meant inheritance. That meant eventual wealth. That meant a lottery ticket she just had to be patient enough to cash. They married after just 8 months of dating. I tried to caution David about rushing, but he accused me of not being supportive. "You just don't like her because she's not from a struggling background like us," he said, and the words stung because they were so wrong. "That's not it at all," I protested. "I just think you should take more time. Mom, I'm 39. I know what I want. I want Tiffany. Can't you just be happy for me?" So I smiled. I attended their wedding. I gave them a generous gift, $10,000 for their honeymoon. And I watched my son marry a woman I didn't trust. The first year of their marriage, Tiffany was on her best behavior. She was sweet to me, attentive to David, playing the role of devoted wife. But slowly her true colors began to show. It started with little comments. "Beatrice, you should really update your wardrobe. I could take you shopping, show you some modern styles." "Beatrice, why do you still drive that old car? People might think you can't afford better." "Beatrice, that house must be worth a fortune now. You could sell it, buy something newer, more comfortable for someone your age." Someone your age. She loved reminding me that I was old. Then the hints became more direct. "David works so hard, and we're trying to save for a house. It's tough out there. My friend's mother-in-law helps them with their mortgage. Isn't that sweet? We'd love to take a vacation, but you know, on David's salary alone." On David's salary alone. As if her salary didn't exist. As if she wasn't working too. I ignored the hints. My money was my business, and I'd raised David to be independent. If they needed help, real help, not just funding a lifestyle, they could ask directly, but they never asked directly. Tiffany just kept hinting, and David started echoing her. Mom, Tiffany thinks you're being a bit tight with money. Tight? How so? You have all that money from selling the business, and you live like you're still struggling. It's kind of selfish, don't you think? Sitting on all that money when your family could use help. I stared at my son, wondering when he'd become this person. David, I earned that money through 40 years of hard work. Your father and I sacrificed everything to build that business. What I do with the proceeds is my decision. But we're family. Being family doesn't entitle you to my wallet. He'd sulked after that conversation, and I knew Tiffany was in his ear, poisoning him against me. The comments about me being cheap and old-fashioned increased. Tiffany would make snide remarks about my quaint lifestyle, my sad little house, my ancient car. Each comment was designed to make me feel small, to shame me into opening my purse. But I'd faced down discrimination as a black business owner in the South. I'd negotiated contracts with CEOs who tried to lowball me. I dealt with suppliers who tried to cheat me. Tiffany's manipulations were child's play compared to what I'd overcome. Still, it hurt. It hurt to see my son being used. It hurt to be treated with such disrespect by the woman he'd married. It hurt to feel like my worth in their eyes was only measured by how much money I'd give them. Then came the dinner invitation. David called me on a Tuesday evening. I was in my kitchen, making myself a simple dinner of baked chicken and vegetables. Marcus and I used to eat like this, healthy, simple, prepared with care. Mom, David said, his voice carrying that artificial cheerfulness that told me Tiffany was beside him coaching. Great news. Tiffany's family wants to have dinner with us. All of us together. Finally get everyone properly acquainted. I was immediately suspicious. Her family. Yes. Her parents, her siblings, their spouses. Everyone. They're really eager to get to know you better. In 4 years of marriage, I'd met Tiffany's parents exactly twice. At the wedding and at a stilted Christmas dinner where they'd looked at me like I was something they'd found on the bottom of their shoe. They were wealthy. Her father was a real estate developer. Her mother a former beauty queen who'd married well. They were the worst kind of wealthy. The kind who'd forgotten what struggle meant, if they'd ever known at all. When? I asked cautiously. This Saturday, at the Grandeur. The Grandeur. I knew that restaurant. It was the most expensive restaurant in Atlanta, the kind of place where a meal could cost more than some people's monthly rent. Marcus and I had never eaten there, not because we couldn't afford it, but because we found that kind of extravagance wasteful. That's a very expensive restaurant, David. I know, but Tiffany's family loves it. They go there for special occasions. And who's paying for this special occasion? There was a pause. I could almost hear Tiffany whispering instructions. Well, Mom, we were hoping you would. You know, since you're the matriarch, it's traditional for the elder to host. Traditional, they were invoking tradition to get me to pay thousands of dollars. David, how many people are we talking about? He did a quick count. Let's see, there's you, me, Tiffany, her parents Gerald and Victoria, her brother Brandon and his wife Michelle, her sister Courtney, and her husband Devin, and their adult children. That's 4 more. So, 14 total including you. 13 people plus me, at the Grandeur, where the cheapest entree was probably $75. And you expect me to pay for all 14 people? It's just one dinner, Mom. You can afford it. You sold your business for what? A couple million? This is nothing to you. There it was. The assumption. The entitlement. I need to think about it. David, what's there to think about? It's family. Let me think about it, I repeated firmly. I'll call you back. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time staring at Marcus's empty chair. What do I do, baby? I asked the silence. Our son is being used, and he can't see it. If I refuse to go, I'm the villain. If I go and refuse to pay, I'm the villain. If I go and pay, I'm the fool. What do I do? The silence didn't answer, but I could almost hear Marcus's voice in my head. "B.A., you've never been anyone's fool. You're not about to start now." He was right. I wasn't a fool. But I also wasn't going to let this situation destroy my relationship with my only child. I needed to handle this carefully, strategically. I called David back the next day. "I'll come to the dinner," I said. That's wonderful, Mom. I'll tell Tiffany. But David, I never agreed to pay for everyone. If I'm expected to host, that needs to be discussed directly, not assumed. Mom, please don't make this awkward. Just come, okay? We'll figure out the bill when we get there. Figure out the bill. Which meant stick me with it. Fine. Saturday at the Grandeur. What time? 7 o'clock. And Mom? Try to dress nicely. Tiffany's family is very appearance conscious. Appearance conscious. Another dig at my simple lifestyle. I spent the next few days preparing. Not my outfit. I'd wear what I always wore. Nice but not flashy. No, I prepared mentally. I researched the Grandeur online. The menu was eye-wateringly expensive. Prefix options started at $200 per person. The wine list featured bottles costing thousands. The dessert menu alone could bankrupt a modest family. I did the math. If everyone ordered freely, and they would because they thought I was paying, the bill could easily reach $8,000. With tip, we'd be looking at close to $12,000. $12,000 for one dinner. I thought about all the families I'd fed over the years through my catering business. How many families could that money feed? How many children's shoes could that buy? How many utility bills could that pay? And they wanted me to spend it on one evening of excess, feeding people who looked down on me, who saw me as nothing more than a convenient wallet. I wasn't angry. Anger would have been easy. I was hurt. Hurt that my son had become this person. Hurt that he'd let his wife scheme against his own mother. Hurt that this was what my legacy had become. Not the hard work, not the community service, not the business I'd built, but simply the old woman with money. But hurt wouldn't help me. Strategy would. I made my plan. Saturday arrived. I dressed carefully. A nice navy dress that I'd worn to Marcus's funeral, and several church events since. Comfortable shoes, my mother's pearl earrings that I wore for special occasions. I looked respectable, dignified, simple. I drove my Honda to the Grandeur, pulling up among the BMWs, Mercedes and Teslas. The valet looked at my car with barely concealed disdain. "Welcome to the Grandeur," he said with minimal enthusiasm as he took my keys. Inside, the restaurant was exactly what I'd expected. All gleaming surfaces, soft lighting, crisp white tablecloths, and an air of exclusivity that came with astronomical prices. The hostess, a young woman with perfect posture and a practiced smile, greeted me. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I'm joining the Brooks Johnson party. Should already be here." "Ah yes. Right this way." She led me through the restaurant to a private dining area in the back. There, seated at a long table, was my welcoming committee. David and Tiffany sat in the middle. Tiffany looked stunning, of course in a red designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly groceries for a year. Diamond earrings caught the light, and her makeup was flawless. Her parents, Gerald and Victoria, sat at what was clearly the head of the table. Gerald was a large man in an expensive suit, the kind of man who took up space and expected others to make room. Victoria was elegant in that brittle way of women who've had too much work done, her face frozen in a pleasant expression that never quite reached her eyes. Brandon, Tiffany's brother, sat with his wife Michelle. He was a younger version of his father, loud, expansive, entitled. Michelle was quiet, mousy, clearly submissive to her husband's dominance. Courtney, Tiffany's sister, sat with her husband Devon. Courtney had the same calculating look as Tiffany, and Devon looked like the kind of man who'd married money and was happy to spend it. Their 4 adult children, 2 each, all in their early 20s, rounded out the table. They were variations on the same theme, privileged, bored, expecting everything handed to them. And at the far end of the table, clearly an afterthought, was an empty chair. My seat. Beatrice. Tiffany stood, performing enthusiasm. "You made it. Come, sit down." I walked to my designated seat at the end of the table, as far from the power center as possible. A strategic choice on Tiffany's part. Isolate the mark. "Everyone, this is David's mother, Beatrice," Tiffany announced. "Hello," I said, nodding to the table. The responses were lukewarm at best. Victoria looked me up and down, her eyes cataloging my simple dress, my lack of designer labels, my modest jewelry. "How practical you look, Beatrice," she said, her tone making clear that practical was not a compliment. "Thank you," I replied evenly. "I believe in dressing appropriately." Gerald barely looked at me, already studying the wine list with intense focus. "They have the '98 Bordeaux," he announced to no one in particular. Excellent vintage. Brandon leaned back in his chair, legs spread wide. So Beatrice, David says you used to be in the food business? I owned a catering company for 40 years. Yes. How quaint, Courtney chimed in. Like a little mom and pop operation. It was a successful business. 50 employees at our peak. 50? Michelle looked genuinely surprised. That's quite large. Michelle? Brandon said sharply. Don't make a big thing of it. It was just catering. Just catering. 40 years of my life, my blood, sweat and tears, dismissed as just catering. I smiled tightly and said nothing. David, sitting in the middle, looked uncomfortable. Good. He should be uncomfortable. He'd led me into this lion's den, and now he was witnessing the lions circling. Well, Tiffany said brightly. Shall we order? Everything here is amazing. Order whatever you want, everyone. This is a special occasion. Order whatever you want, because they weren't paying. The waiter appeared, a young man with a professional smile and a notepad at the ready. Good evening, I'm Thomas, and I'll be serving you tonight. Can I start you with some wine? Gerald didn't hesitate. Yes, we'll have the 98 Chateau Margaux, and the 2015 Opus 1 as well. 2 bottles of each. I quickly calculated in my head. Those wines were easily $400 to $500 per bottle. $1,600 just in wine to start. Thomas didn't blink. Excellent choices, sir. And some appetizers while we wait, Victoria added. The caviar service for the table, and the foie gras. Of course, madam. I watched as the table launched into ordering like they were competing to see who could spend the most money. Brandon, I'll have the Wagyu beef, extra large portion, and start me with the lobster bisque. Michelle, glancing at her husband, just the mixed green salad for me. Don't be boring, Michelle, Brandon snapped. Have the Chilean sea bass at least. Michelle nodded meekly. Courtney, I'm doing the tasting menu. 8 courses. I knew the tasting menu was $350 per person, 8 courses of tiny portions designed to showcase the chef's skill and the diner's wealth. Devon, same for me. Tasting menu. Their adult children followed suit. Tasting menus, expensive steaks, lobster, the most expensive items on the menu. They ordered with the abandon of people who never saw the bill. Tiffany ordered the Chilean sea bass, the most expensive fish dish. David, looking increasingly uncomfortable, ordered a steak, not the most expensive but not modest either. Finally, Thomas turned to me. And for you, ma'am? The entire table was watching. This was the test. Would I order extravagantly like them, proving I had money, or would I order modestly, proving I was the cheap old woman they believed me to be? I smiled at Thomas. I'll have the house salad, please, with the house vinaigrette, and water to drink. Silence. Then Victoria laughed. A brittle sound. Oh, Beatrice, you don't have to be so modest. This is a celebration. Treat yourself. I'm treating myself to what I want, I replied calmly. I've never been one for rich foods. Upsets my stomach. Tiffany's smile was strained. Mom, please. Order something more. You're hosting after all. You should enjoy yourself. There it was. You're hosting, the assumption stated as fact. I'll enjoy my salad. Thank you. Thomas, ever professional, noted my order and disappeared. The meal commenced. Wine flowed freely. All 4 bottles opened and poured generously. The caviar arrived, a small tin of fish eggs that cost more than some people's weekly salary. They ate it with tiny spoons, making exaggerated sounds of appreciation. You're not having any caviar, Beatrice? Gerald asked, noticing my untouched plate. Not a fan, I said. Never understood the appeal of fish eggs. Brandon snorted. It's an acquired taste, refined palate and all that. I suppose my palate isn't refined enough, I replied evenly. The appetizers came. Lobster bisque for Brandon, foie gras for others, delicate arrangements of food that looked more like art than sustenance. My salad arrived, fresh greens, with a simple vinaigrette. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite, remembering Mama's lessons about gratitude for food. Throughout the meal the conversation flowed around me, rarely including me except to make subtle jabs. So Beatrice, Victoria said, dabbing her lips with her napkin, David tells us you're still in that same house you've had for decades. How sentimental. It's home, I replied. My husband and I built our life there. But surely you could afford something newer, more modern. Those old neighborhoods aren't what they used to be. My neighborhood is fine, Good people, strong community. If you say so, Victoria said dismissively. Courtney leaned forward. We just bought a condo in Buckhead. 3 million, but it's worth it for the location and the amenities. You really should consider upgrading, Beatrice. 3 million for a condo. And they were expecting me to pay for their dinner because I was wealthy. I'm happy where I am, I said. That's the problem with the older generation, Brandon announced to the table. No ambition, no drive to improve. I looked at him steadily. I built a business from nothing to 50 employees over 40 years. I'd say that shows quite a bit of drive. Brandon waved his hand dismissively. But what are you doing now? Just sitting on your money, living in the past? I'm enjoying my retirement, spending time with people who matter, and making decisions about my life based on my values, not others' expectations. The table went quiet for a moment. Then Gerald laughed loudly. Well said, Beatrice. Though I have to say, there's nothing wrong with enjoying the finer things. You worked hard for your money. You should spend it. Spend it on people like you, he meant. The main courses arrived. Wagyu beef, lobster, Chilean sea bass, tasting menu courses in miniature portions. My plate was empty, my salad finished. You're not having an entree? Tiffany asked, her voice carrying just a hint of panic. If I wasn't ordering much, could I use that as an excuse not to pay the whole bill? The salad was filling, I said. I don't eat as much as I used to. You should at least try the bread, David offered, looking genuinely concerned. You've barely eaten. I'm fine, son. The meal continued. More wine was ordered. Desserts were discussed with anticipation. The check was growing, like a monster feeding on their excess. I sat quietly observing. I watched how they ate without gratitude, without appreciation, just consumption for consumption's sake. I thought about all the meals I'd catered over the years, the joy people took in food prepared with love, the way good food brought people together. This wasn't about food, this was about display, about dominance, about using wealth as a weapon. And they thought I'd be their victim. Finally, after desserts, elaborate confections that cost $40 each, after dinner drinks, and a cheese course that Gerald insisted on, the moment arrived. Thomas appeared with the check in a leather folder. He placed it carefully on the table, near my end, near the host. Victoria smiled broadly. Well, this has been absolutely lovely. Thank you so much for treating us, Beatrice. You're so generous. I hadn't agreed to treat anyone, but here we were. Tiffany reached for the check folder with trembling anticipation. She opened it, and I watched her eyes widen, a smile playing at her lips. She showed it to her mother, and they exchanged satisfied glances. Then Tiffany turned to me, her face arranged in sweet innocence. Honey, she said, her voice dripping with false affection. Cash or card? The table went still. Everyone watching, waiting. This was their moment of triumph. The old, simple, cheap woman would now be forced to pay nearly $10,000 for the privilege of being mocked by people who saw her as nothing more than a wallet. I let the moment stretch, let them savor their anticipated victory. Then I smiled. Let me see that bill first, please. Tiffany's smile faltered slightly, but she handed over the folder. I opened it, and looked at the total. $8,827.60. Nearly $9,000 for one meal. I studied the itemized bill carefully, line by line, taking my time. The silence at the table grew heavy. Then I reached into my bag. Everyone leaned forward, expecting to see a credit card or perhaps a thick envelope of cash. Instead, I pulled out my reading glasses, a small notebook, and a pen. Confusion rippled across the table. I put on my glasses and began to write in my notebook, consulting the bill as I worked. What are you doing? Tiffany asked, her voice tight. Math, I replied simply. I'm very good at math. Had to be, running a business for 40 years. I continued writing, calculating. Finally, I looked up at the table. All right, I said, my voice carrying clear and steady. Let's break this down, shall we? Break what down? Gerald asked, his brow furrowed. The bill, each person's share. Dead silence. Gerald and Victoria, I began, consulting my notes. You ordered the 98 Chateau Margaux and the 2015 Opus 1. That's your share of the wine, roughly $800. Plus the caviar service and foie gras appetizers you initiated, another $400. Your entrees and desserts, an additional $350. Your share comes to approximately $50. Victoria's mouth fell open. Brandon and Michelle, I continued, your wine share, the lobster bisque, wagyu beef, sea bass desserts and your portion of the appetizers and cheese course. Brandon's face was turning red. Courtney and Davin, 2 tasting menus at $350 each, plus wine, plus desserts and after-dinner drinks. Courtney looked like she'd swallowed something sour. I went through each of their children's orders, calculating shares, breaking down costs. And finally, I said, my order, 1 house salad with vinaigrette and water. My portion of this bill is $28. I reached into my purse and pulled out 2 $20 bills. I placed them on the table. There's my share, plus a generous tip for Thomas, who's been excellent. I closed my notebook and looked around the table at the stunned faces. You can't be serious, Tiffany finally sputtered. You're supposed to be hosting. You're supposed to pay for everyone. I don't recall agreeing to that, I replied calmly. David asked me to join the family dinner. I joined. He mentioned I might be expected to host, but I never confirmed. In any case, hosting doesn't mean being financially exploited. This is humiliating, Victoria hissed. In front of our children. What's humiliating? I said, my voice still even but now carrying steel, is assuming an elderly woman will bankroll your extravagance simply because you believe she's too weak or too desperate for family approval to say no. David. Tiffany turned to my son, her face contorted with fury. Say something. This is your mother. David looked at me, then at his wife, then back at me. I could see the conflict in his face, the realization slowly dawning. Mom, he said weakly, couldn't you just, this is really embarrassing. What's embarrassing, David, is that you allowed your wife to set your mother up for financial exploitation. What's embarrassing is that you've become the kind of man who values money over respect. What's embarrassing is that you've forgotten everything your father and I taught you about dignity, hard work, and family. David's face crumpled. Gerald stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is outrageous. We were invited here under false pretenses. Were you? I asked, standing as well. I may be shorter than him, but I've never let anyone tower over me. Or did you assume that because I'm old and black and come from a working-class background that I'd be easily manipulated? Did you think because I live simply that I'm desperate for approval from people like you? Gerald's face went red. Let me be very clear, I continued, my voice carrying across the table. I built my wealth through 40 years of hard work. My husband and I started with nothing, and created a business that employed 50 people and served our community. We worked 16-hour days, sacrificed vacations, delayed gratification, lived below our means, and invested wisely. I looked at each of them in turn. I live in a modest house because my husband and I built our life there, and his memory lives in those walls. I drive an old car because my husband bought it for me, and sitting in it makes me feel close to him. I dress simply because I know my worth isn't determined by a designer label. I am not cheap. I am not miserly. I am wise. I am self-respecting, and I will not be manipulated, exploited, or humiliated by anyone, including my own family. I picked up my purse. You all ordered $9,000 worth of food and wine, treating this restaurant like your personal feeding trough. You did so assuming someone else would pay. That someone will not be me. Sort out your own bill. I suggest you start by figuring out whose credit cards work. I began to walk away, then stopped and turned back to Tiffany. And Tiffany, when you asked cash or card, you expected submission. You expected me to meekly hand over my money, because I'm old and you think old means weak. But here's what you failed to understand. I've been underestimated my entire life. As a black woman in business, as a female entrepreneur in a male-dominated world, as someone who came from poverty, I've faced discrimination, dismissal, and disrespect from people far more powerful than you. And I overcame all of it. You think a dinner bill scares me, child, please. I walked out of that private dining room with my head held high. Behind me I heard chaos erupting. This is your fault, Tiffany? Victoria's shrill voice. My fault? This was your idea to test her. Tiffany shrieking back. Everyone needs to calm down and figure out this bill. Gerald's booming command. I don't have $9,000. One of the adult children's panicked voice. The manager is coming over. Brandon's alarmed observation. I kept walking. Outside I handed my ticket to the valet. He brought around my Honda and I saw him glance back at the restaurant, where the raised voices were now audible even outside. Everything all right, ma'am? He asked. I smiled. Everything is just fine, young man. Just fine. I drove home in peaceful silence. My heart full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not the sinful kind of pride, but the righteous kind. The kind that comes from standing up for yourself. From refusing to be diminished. From knowing your worth and demanding others recognize it too. When I got home, I went to my bedroom and picked up the framed photo of Marcus and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so hopeful, so completely in love. Did I do good, baby? I asked the photo. Did I make you proud? In my heart, I heard his voice. You did perfect, B. You did perfect. I sat in my simple house, in my comfortable chair, surrounded by memories of my real wealth, love, dignity, self-respect, and the knowledge that my worth was never measured in how much I would spend to earn approval. An hour later, David called. I let it ring twice before answering. Mom? His voice was shaky. David. Mom? I don't even know what to say. Then don't say anything yet. Just listen. I heard him take a breath. What happened back there, I said, was the result of choices. Tiffany's choice to see me as an ATM. Your choice to go along with her schemes. Your in-laws' choice to treat me as someone beneath them. And my choice to refuse to be anyone's victim. Mom, I'm so sorry. Let me finish. I love you, David. You're my only child. The greatest blessing your father and I ever received. But love doesn't mean allowing yourself to be used. Love doesn't mean accepting disrespect. Love doesn't mean staying silent while someone manipulates your only parent. I know. You're right. What happened at the restaurant after I left? David sighed heavily. It was a disaster. No one wanted to pay, credit cards were maxed out. Gerald finally put it on his card, but he's furious. He's threatening to sue you for, I don't even know what, false invitation or something ridiculous. Let him try. I never agreed to pay for anyone. And I have text messages to prove it. Tiffany is... David paused. Tiffany is blaming everyone but herself. She's furious with you, with me, with her parents. She's talking about how you humiliated her family. I humiliated them, they humiliated themselves with their greed and assumptions. I know. I see that now, Mom. I've been so blind. She's been in my ear for years, telling me you were selfish, that you were hoarding money, that you didn't care about us. And I believed her because I wanted to believe my wife loved me for me, not for what she thought she could get. And now I see what you and Dad saw from the beginning. She's not who I thought she was, or maybe she is. And I just didn't want to see it. What are you going to do about it? Silence. Then, I don't know yet, but I know things can't continue the way they've been. That's a start. Mom, can I come see you tomorrow, just us? I want to talk, really talk. You're always welcome in my home, David, you know that. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby, always have, always will. After we hung up, I made myself a cup of tea and sat on my porch in the evening air. The neighborhood was quiet, peaceful, familiar. My neighbor Miss Clara waved from her yard, and I waved back. This was my community, my home, my life. I didn't need a $3 million condo in Buckhead. I didn't need designer labels. I didn't need to impress anyone. I had what mattered. The next day David came over. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd taught him to make cornbread when he was 7. Where Marcus had helped him with homework, where we'd had countless family dinners. Tell me what you're thinking, I said. David ran his hands over his face. I'm thinking I've been a terrible son. I'm thinking I let Tiffany turn me against the person who's loved me unconditionally my whole life. I'm thinking Dad would be ashamed of me. Your father loved you deeply. He wouldn't be ashamed of you. He'd be disappointed in your choices but not ashamed of you. That's worse somehow. What are you going to do about Tiffany? David looked up at me with pained eyes. I confronted her last night, asked her directly if she married me for money. You know what she said? What? She said of course not. She said she married me because I was a good investment with potential for returns. Mom, she literally used financial language to describe our marriage. I shook my head sadly. I asked her about her feelings for me. She said feelings were secondary to security. She said love was unrealistic. She said what mattered was building wealth and status. And what do you think about that? I think I've been living a lie for 4 years. I think I married a woman who never loved me. I think I almost lost my relationship with you for someone who saw us both as means to an end. Almost lost. But not quite. David reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm getting a divorce. I squeezed his hand. Are you sure? This is a big decision. I'm sure. I can't stay married to someone who sees me as a paycheck and sees you as an obstacle. I can't stay married to someone who orchestrated that dinner to humiliate and exploit my own mother. I can't stay married to someone who doesn't understand what real family means. It won't be easy. Divorces are messy. I know, but staying married to her would be worse. At least divorce is honest. What we have now is a lie. I stood up and pulled my son into a hug. He cried then, sobs shaking his shoulders, and I held him like I had when he was a boy and the world felt too big and too hard. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. Shh. It's okay, baby. You're learning. That's all any of us can do. The divorce was indeed messy. Tiffany fought for everything she could get, claiming she'd sacrificed her career for the marriage, that she'd supported David's potential, that she was entitled to compensation. But David had a good lawyer, and more importantly, he had the truth on his side. Text messages showed Tiffany's schemes. Financial records showed she'd been stashing money in secret accounts. The prenup they'd signed, that Tiffany had arrogantly insisted on to protect her family's assets, actually protected David since he had minimal assets at the time of marriage. In the end, Tiffany walked away with very little. She was furious, threatening lawsuits, smear campaigns, revenge. But as I told David, threats from small people are just noise. Don't let the noise distract you from rebuilding your life. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, David came to dinner at my house. It had become our tradition again. Sunday dinners, just the two of us reconnecting, rebuilding. I got a promotion at work, he announced over my pot roast. David, that's wonderful. Senior manager, more responsibility, better pay. He smiled. I'm going to be okay, Mom, better than okay. I never doubted it. And I've been thinking about what you said, about knowing your worth. I've been undervaluing myself for years. At work, in relationships, everywhere. I let Tiffany make me feel like I wasn't enough, like I needed her to be complete. But I am enough. I learned that from you. I felt tears prick my eyes. Your father would be so proud of you right now. I hope so. I'm trying to be the man he raised me to be. The man who values integrity over status, character over wealth, family over appearance. You're getting there, baby. You're getting there. As we finished dinner, David asked, Mom, can I ask you something? Anything? The money from the business, all your savings, what are you planning to do with it? I smiled. I've already started. Your father and I always talked about giving back. I've set up a scholarship fund for students from working class backgrounds who want to start their own businesses. The Beatrice and Marcus Johnson Entrepreneurship Fund. It'll provide seed money and mentorship for young people who have the drive but not the capital. David's eyes widened. Mom, that's amazing. There's more. I've donated to the local food bank, the community center, and the youth employment program, and I've set aside money for you, not to spend on extravagance, but for your future. A house, retirement, emergencies, real security, not status symbols. David was quiet for a moment. Then he said, That's real wealth, isn't it? Not what you have, but what you do with it. How you use it to lift others up. Your father taught me that. Wealth is a tool, not a destination. Use it wisely, share it generously, and never let it define your worth. I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. A year later, on what would have been Marcus's and my 50th wedding anniversary, I held the first award ceremony for the scholarship fund. 20 young entrepreneurs received seed money and mentorship to start their businesses. Standing on that stage, presenting those checks, seeing those hopeful faces, I felt Marcus beside me. This was our legacy, not the money, not the business, but the impact. The lives changed, the opportunities created, the dreams made possible. David was in the audience, beaming with pride. After the ceremony, he found me. You were incredible up there, Mom. I was just honoring your father's memory. No, you were being exactly who you've always been. Strong, wise, generous, and uncompromising in your values. Dad would say he told me so about what an amazing woman you are. I laughed. He probably would. As we left the event, David said, You know, I ran into someone from Tiffany's family the other day, Brandon. Oh? How did that go? He barely looked at me. But I heard through mutual friends that their family is in financial trouble. Gerald's real estate deals went south. They're over-leveraged and they might lose everything. That's sad, I said, and I meant it. David looked at me surprised. You feel sad for them? After what they did to you? They're human beings who made choices based on valuing the wrong things. Now they're suffering the consequences. That's sad. It doesn't mean I forgive what they did, but I can feel compassion for their suffering. David shook his head. I still have a lot to learn from you, don't I? We all have a lot to learn from each other. Baby, that's what life is. Sometimes I think about that night at the Grandeur. About Tiffany's smug smile as she asked cash or card. About the expectation that I would crumble, submit, pay thousands of dollars for the privilege of being disrespected. They thought they knew me. The simple old woman. The unsophisticated widow. The easy mark. They didn't know me at all. They didn't know that I'd faced down racism in business deals. That I'd negotiated with corporate CEOs who tried to lowball me. That I'd built an empire from nothing through sheer determination and wise decisions. They saw my modest clothes and assumed poverty. They saw my simple house and assumed ignorance. They saw my old car and assumed weakness. What they couldn't see was my strength. My wisdom. My unshakable sense of self-worth. When I opened my bag that night and pulled out my notebook instead of my wallet, I wasn't just refusing to pay their bill. I was refusing to accept their definition of my worth. I was refusing to buy their respect. I was refusing to be anyone's fool. That moment of silence when 13 entitled people realized their scheme had failed was worth more than all the money I've ever earned. Because in that silence I heard my mother's voice. Know your worth, baby girl. Don't let nobody tell you what you're worth. Because in that silence, I heard Marcus's voice. That's my bee, it's strong as steel and twice as valuable. Because in that silence I heard my own voice, finally loud and clear. I am enough. I have always been enough. And I will never let anyone convince me otherwise. My name is Beatrice Annette Johnson. I am 69 years old. I am a widow. I am a mother. I am a black woman who built a business from nothing. I am a woman who knows her worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. And when you ask me cash or card, expecting me to pay for your disrespect, expecting me to fund your manipulation, expecting me to submit to your schemes, I'll smile. I'll open my bag, and I'll show you exactly what wisdom looks like. The end.